My name is Darien Kestrel, and until recently, I believed my life was well ordered. I had a stable job, a comfortable home, and a loving family, or so I thought. I was a single-minded man focused on providing for my family, and my 12-year-old son, Ashvin, was my pride. My wife, Livia, and I had built our lives around routines and quiet evenings, and I trusted that our shared world was secure. But as it often happens in life, the unexpected was lurking beneath the surface. It began with small details. I noticed Livia's phone buzzing at odd hours when she was supposed to be at home. At first, I dismissed it as work-related or maybe just mundane personal chatter. But there were times when I caught her glancing at her phone with an unreadable expression, a mixture of distraction and something else I couldn't quite pin down. I chalked it up to the busy rhythm of modern life and trusted her implicitly. Ashvin, now 12 and entering middle school, was thriving under the guidance of his teachers. One of them, in particular, had caught my eye for reasons I wouldn't have expected. His name was Kashan Rook, a teacher with an unusual blend of charisma and intensity. Kashan was not what I would call conventional. His name alone set him apart, and his teaching style was both unconventional and engaging. He often wore dark, tailored suits and spoke with an air of quiet authority that made him memorable to both students and parents alike. One rainy afternoon, I was at the school for a parent-teacher conference. I had been reassured by Ashvin's progress report, but I couldn't shake a vague sense of unease. The conference was held in a modest, fluorescent-lit room, and as I waited, I observed Kashan Rook speaking animatedly with another parent. His gestures were precise and controlled, yet there was a glimmer in his eyes that suggested he harbored secrets far beyond lesson plans and student behavior. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about the encounter left me unsettled. After the conference, I lingered near the entrance, partly to avoid the drizzle and partly to process the subtle signals of discomfort. That's when I saw Livia. She had arrived separately and was speaking quietly with Kashan near the school's entrance. I paused, hidden behind a column, watching as they exchanged a look that seemed too intimate for a casual conversation. It was brief, a mere fraction of a second, but it planted a seed of doubt in my mind. At home that evening, the familiar clink of dinnerware and the soft hum of the television should have offered solace. Instead, my mind replayed the brief encounter. I tried to dismiss it, convinced that perhaps I was reading too much into a harmless exchange. But the feeling of betrayal was already starting to form in the recesses of my thoughts. I remembered the extra care Livia had taken with her appearance lately. Subtle changes, a new perfume, a hint of nervous energy. Had these details been trying to tell me something? I turned over the events of the day in my mind as I sat in my study. My work desk was littered with reports and documents, but my focus was elsewhere. I recalled the intensity in Kashan's eyes and the hushed tone of Livia's voice when she spoke with him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the puzzle was slowly taking shape. My gut told me that there was more than a simple, innocent encounter happening. That night, while Ashvin slept soundly in his room, I sat alone in the living room. The quiet was oppressive, filled with memories of happier times when trust was abundant. I found myself questioning every detail. The late-night calls on Livia's phone, the furtive glances, the unexplained changes in her routine. The evidence was circumstantial, yet my instincts were rarely wrong. I began to suspect that Livia's interactions with Kashan were not solely about school matters. The next morning, I decided to be methodical. I combed through old text messages and emails, searching for any inconsistencies or hints that could confirm my growing suspicion. I noticed that Livia's messages sometimes ended abruptly when she was near the school, and there were references to meetings that didn't quite add up with her usual schedule. I wasn't certain yet, but the signs were becoming too consistent to ignore. By the time the weekend came, my inner turmoil had escalated. I took a long drive, not really knowing where I was headed. The open road allowed me to think, and the isolation forced my mind to confront the reality of the situation. Every mile I traveled, the image of Livia with Kashan replayed relentlessly. I tried to justify it. Perhaps they were discussing school projects or extracurricular activities. But the looks they exchanged and the way Livia's eyes would occasionally flit toward Kashan when I was not present. These details didn't fit into a simple explanation. Returning home later that day, I resolved to be discreet. I couldn't confront Livia without irrefutable evidence. Not yet. I needed to observe, to piece together a timeline that would either confirm or refute my suspicions. I began to keep a log of her departures, her returns, and the moments when she seemed distant. Every detail was recorded meticulously. I wasn't a spy by nature, but desperation had a way of turning an ordinary man into someone capable of covert observation that as days turned into weeks. The pattern became more pronounced. Livia's late meetings at the school, her unexplained absences, and the subtle changes in her behavior were too consistent to dismiss as mere coincidences. The nagging feeling of betrayal grew, twisting inside me until it was impossible to ignore. I was on the brink of confronting her when I received an unexpected text from an unknown number. "Not all is as it seems. Look deeper." The message was brief but sent a shiver down my spine. Who could be reaching out to me? Was this someone aware of my suspicions? Or perhaps someone with their own agenda? That message was the final nudge I needed. The comfort of ignorance was gone, replaced by a determination to uncover the truth. I realized that what I had assumed was a harmless encounter had the potential to unravel everything I believed about my marriage, my family, and the life I'd built. And so, armed with quiet resolve and a mounting dossier of observations, I prepared for the confrontation that would inevitably change everything. After that ominous text, I felt compelled to dig deeper. My life had always been orderly, governed by routine and trust. Now, every passing moment felt like a clue waiting to be unraveled. I began by focusing on the school, where the lines between professional duty and personal lives blurred. I visited during drop-off hours, blending into the background as parents and students streamed in and out. My objective was clear: observe without being noticed, to see if I could catch even the slightest sign that would confirm my suspicions. During one of these visits, I noticed Livia conversing briefly with another teacher near the entrance. It wasn't Cashin this time, but the interaction was equally charged. They exchanged a few words, and I saw a furtive glance pass between them. The teacher, whose name I later learned was Paxson Wynne, seemed to be urging Livia to step away from a group of other staff members. Livia's response was a subtle nod, and then they parted ways. I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that brief exchange wasn't as innocent as it appeared. Returning home, I decided that a careful review of our family schedule might yield additional insights. I combed through our shared digital calendar and cross-referenced it with the times Livia mentioned having meetings at the school. Inconsistencies began to emerge. Several appointments were recorded under vague descriptions like project discussion or curriculum review, which did not align with her usual responsibilities. More unsettling were the instances where she was noted as being at school well past the usual hours, sometimes overlapping with the time Cashin was known to be there. I made detailed notes, annotating each anomaly with the date, time, and my observations that evening. After tucking Ashvin into bed, I sat in my study surrounded by my growing dossier of observations. The room, once a sanctuary for work, now became a command center for my investigation. I reviewed my log, Livia's unexplained absences, her hurried departures from home, and the subtle shifts in her routine. A pattern was emerging. A pattern that pointed toward a double life that I had never suspected. Determined to get more concrete evidence, I decided to discreetly speak with a few people who might have seen or heard something unusual. I started with one of Ashvin's close friends, Jackson Marrow, whose mother was a teacher at the school. Over a casual conversation at a local cafe, I asked about the school's recent happenings. Jackson was cautious at first, but eventually, he mentioned that some of his classmates had been talking about a special project at school. He hesitated before adding that certain teachers seemed to be spending more time with select students and even had private sessions outside of regular class hours. His tone was ambiguous, neither confirming nor denying any impropriety, but it was enough to make me question further. The next morning, I called the school's front office under the pretext of inquiring about Ashvin's progress and upcoming events. The receptionist, a soft-spoken woman named Virgil, provided standard answers, but I noticed her unease when I asked about after-hours events. She assured me that all staff meetings were strictly professional, but her voice lacked conviction. I thanked her and ended the call, my mind buzzing with doubts as days passed. I began receiving more anonymous messages. They were terse, cryptic warnings. There are layers beneath the surface. Don't trust appearances. One message even mentioned, the truth is hidden in plain sight at the school. I couldn't tell if these were the work of someone sympathetic to my cause or another layer of manipulation meant to distract me. Still, every message added to the mounting pressure to uncover the reality of Livia's activities. I also started noticing changes in Livia's behavior. On days when I wasn't watching closely, she seemed more distant, her smile forced, her laughter hollow. It was as if she were constantly aware of someone else's gaze, someone who wasn't supposed to see the truth of her actions. I recalled the moment at the school when she had met Cashin Rook. That brief encounter now loomed large in my memory, colored by all the discrepancies and unusual interactions I had since witnessed. Late one night, I decided to revisit the scene of the initial spark of suspicion, the school's parking lot after hours. I parked my car at a distance and observed through the tinted windows as staff members came and went. It wasn't long before I noticed Livia's car pull into the lot. Instead of heading toward the main building, she drove to a secluded area near the back. I watched, heart pounding, as a car pulled up alongside hers. Out stepped Cashin Rook. They spoke briefly. Their conversation was too soft to catch, but the body language was unmistakable. An intimacy that wasn't part of a professional exchange. After a few minutes, they got back into their cars and drove off separately, leaving me with more questions than answers. The evidence was growing, and so was my resolve. Every observation, every anonymous text, every hushed conversation at the school was reinforcing the reality I dreaded. The betrayal was no longer just an abstract feeling. It was now a series of concrete, unsettling facts that pointed directly to Livia's involvement with Cashin. Yet, amidst all the confusion and mounting evidence, I couldn't help but wonder about the deeper motives. Was it simply an affair? Or was there another layer? A scheme or a secret plan that involved more than just our failing marriage? I sat back in my study that night, the anonymous messages glowing on my laptop screen. I felt isolated, betrayed not just by Livia, but by a web of deceit that had infiltrated what I thought was a secure, predictable life. With every passing moment, my determination hardened. I resolved to gather irrefutable evidence. Documents, recordings, any trace that could expose this betrayal completely. The confrontation was becoming inevitable. I now had a dossier filled with observations and suspicions that I could no longer ignore. There was a dangerous mix of personal pain and the need for the truth that drove me forward. With every piece of evidence I collected, the stakes grew higher, and so did my resolve to face the betrayal head-on. The journey to uncover the truth had only just begun, and I knew that the path ahead would demand courage and unwavering determination. I decided that the next step was to confront the situation head-on by seeking evidence that could no longer be dismissed as circumstantial. With my notebook in hand and my phone recording every detail, I returned to the school one brisk afternoon during a time when fewer parents were present. I parked inconspicuously in the lot and observed from a distance. My eyes were fixed on the entrance where Livia was scheduled to meet someone. I couldn't shake the memory of that night in the parking lot, the secret rendezvous between her and Cashin, and now I needed confirmation. Around 3 p.m., I saw her walking briskly towards a side door marked Faculty in Trance. I stayed hidden behind a cluster of trees until she passed, then quietly followed at a safe distance. As she entered the building, I made a mental note of the time and turned my attention to the school's perimeter. I circled around the back, where I suspected there might be a secondary exit used for after-hours meetings. There, near an unmarked door, I observed Cashin Rook waiting. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes scanned the area with practiced caution. The minutes dragged by as I recorded every detail on my phone. Finally, Livia emerged from the building and met Cashin at the door. Their conversation was brief, but it carried an air of secrecy. I managed to capture snippets of their exchange. Words like schedule, project, and meeting were mentioned, but the tone suggested that these were just cover phrases. It was clear to me that their encounter was far more personal than an official discussion about school matters. The footage on my phone was unsettling, and I returned home that evening with a heavy sense of resolve and betrayal. Instead of confronting Livia immediately, I decided to analyze the evidence. I spent hours reviewing the recording, pausing at moments when their body language revealed more than their words. The way Livia's hand lingered on Cashin's arm, the subtle tilt of her head, and the furtive glances they exchanged. All these details painted a picture of intimacy that went beyond professional decorum. That night, while Ashvin slept, I compiled my notes and compared them with digital traces. I cross-referenced the dates and times of Livia's absences with the school calendar and noticed a disturbing pattern. Every time she was supposed to attend a meeting after school hours, Cashin's presence was confirmed by staff schedules. I dug into the school's public records and found that Cashin had been receiving extra payments for special tutoring sessions that were not part of the regular curriculum. The irregularities in his contract raised more questions than they answered. Determined to unravel the full extent of the betrayal, I reached out to a former colleague who worked in the school administration, a woman named Eleanor Thorne. Over the phone, in hushed tones, she confirmed that there had been whispers among the staff about unofficial meetings between Cashin and a parent. While she wouldn't divulge names or details, her cautious tone suggested that something was indeed amiss. Her confirmation reinforced my suspicion that the affair was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of behavior. As I pieced together the timeline of Livia's movements, another twist emerged. A week later, I received an email from an unknown sender with the subject line, "The Other Side." The email contained a scanned receipt from a nearby hotel, dated the same day as one of Livia's after-hours meetings. The receipt was for a room booked under the name Livia S. This new piece of evidence not only confirmed that she was meeting someone outside the school's premises, but also hinted at a potentially deeper level of deceit. The idea that my wife might be orchestrating meetings at a hotel added a layer of danger to the situation, one that extended far beyond a simple betrayal. With every new piece of evidence, my emotions shifted from disbelief to cold determination. I realized that the web of deceit was more complex than I had initially feared. I was not only facing the personal pain of betrayal, but was also entangled in a scheme that involved hidden meetings, dubious contracts, and the silent complicity of an institution I once trusted. Sitting in the dim light of my study, surrounded by printed records and digital files, I knew the time for subtle observation was coming to an end. I was now fully committed to exposing the truth, no matter the cost. The mounting evidence left no room for doubt. Livia's secret life, fueled by meetings with Cashin and possibly orchestrated through the school's back channels, was a betrayal of trust on multiple levels. I resolved that my next step would be to confront Livia directly, armed with the undeniable evidence of her duplicity. The confrontation would have to be precise and calculated, as it was no longer just about our fractured marriage. It was about dismantling a network of deceit that had infiltrated the very fabric of our family life. The mounting evidence had pushed me past the point of mere observation. I realized that confronting Livia directly, without fully understanding the breadth of this deception, could lead to irreversible consequences. I needed to dig deeper into the tangled connections that seemed to stretch far beyond a simple extramarital affair. With my dossier in hand, I began methodically piecing together the latest clues. The email receipt from the hotel remained the most jarring piece of evidence. I contacted the hotel under a pretext, posing as a business representative interested in securing records for a minor inquiry. The receptionist, a guarded woman named Marnix, confirmed that a room had indeed been booked under the name Livia S. On the date in question, there was no further detail, but the confirmation was damning. I saved the information, adding it to my collection of documents that, piece by piece, painted a picture of duplicity. With this new evidence, I turned my attention back to the school. I needed to establish a clear timeline connecting Livia's absences, Cashin's extra payments, and any unusual activities that could indicate a broader scheme. I revisited the school's public records and discovered that several staff members had received bonus payments that did not match their official roles. The amounts were small, almost insignificant on their own, but the frequency and timing suggested they were part of an unofficial arrangement. It appeared that Cashin Rook might have been involved in tutoring sessions or extracurricular projects that generated unrecorded income. The pattern was too consistent to be accidental. One evening, I arranged a discreet meeting with Eleanor Thorne, the former administrator who had hinted at internal irregularities. We met at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Over lukewarm coffee, Eleanor confirmed that there had been murmurs among the staff about unauthorized meetings and unconventional arrangements with some parents. I heard that certain teachers were being rewarded for activities outside the standard curriculum, she confided in a hushed tone. But no one ever knew the full extent, and no one dared ask too many questions. Her admission deepened my suspicions. It wasn't just a personal betrayal. Livia's involvement might have been part of a network of covert exchanges between the school and a circle of parents and teachers. After that meeting, I shifted my focus to my son, Ashvin. The last thing I wanted was for him to be caught in the crossfire of a scandal that could irreparably harm his trust in both his parents and his educators. I began to monitor Ashvin's interactions at school, watching for any signs that his teacher's influence extended into his daily routine. During a routine drop-off one morning, I noticed Kashin lingering near the school entrance, watching Ashvin as he made his way inside. The look Kashin gave was ambiguous, a mix of encouragement and something else that I couldn't quite decipher. It unsettled me, not because of any overt wrongdoing, but because it underscored how deeply the teacher's presence had permeated our family's life. Home that evening, as I reviewed my growing body of evidence, a new anonymous message arrived on my phone. The next piece is closer than you think. Check where you least expect. The cryptic warning compelled me to reassess my own space. I scanned our home for anything out of place. Old receipts, hidden phone messages, even unexplained deposits in our bank account. In the back of my closet, tucked behind a box of Ashvin's school projects, I discovered an envelope containing a series of photos. The images, taken over several weeks, depicted Livia meeting with Kashin in various locations: a coffee shop, a park bench, and even near the school grounds. One photo was particularly disturbing. It showed Livia entering the hotel alone, her expression tense and determined. The envelope's presence in my closet suggested that someone else had been watching too. The realization that my private life had become fodder for an external observer left me with a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Who was sending these messages? Had someone else become entangled in this web of deceit? Or was it another layer of manipulation by Livia or Kashin? The questions piled up, but one thing was clear. The betrayal ran deeper than a simple affair. It now appeared that my family was caught in a much larger scheme, one that involved undisclosed financial dealings, manipulated school records, and covert surveillance. By the time I finished reviewing the photos, I had a decision to make. I was determined to confront Livia with the evidence and force an explanation, but I also knew that any misstep could jeopardize not only our marriage but also Ashvin's future. My next move would have to be calculated and precise. I spent the rest of the night planning, reviewing every detail of the timeline, every anonymous tip, every irregular transaction. I resolved that, once I had all the pieces in place, I would take the confrontation to a place where there could be no more secrets. That I end that quiet, dark hour, surrounded by the silent testimony of hidden photographs and scanned documents. I realized that the path to retribution was set. I wasn't just dealing with personal betrayal. I was confronting an elaborate network that had compromised the integrity of my family's life. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined, and the coming confrontation would be as much about reclaiming my life as it was about exposing the web of deceit that threatened to destroy everything I held dear. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I anticipated. I had gathered every piece of damning evidence: photographs, bank receipts, surveillance footage, and a trail of anonymous messages that detailed Livia's secret liaisons with Kashin and implicated the hidden network exploiting the school's resources. The final piece was to expose it all, not just to Livia, but to everyone who had been duped by her deceit. I had arranged a meeting with the school board and local law enforcement, ensuring that all the evidence was collected and corroborated. This wasn't just personal retribution. It was a bid to dismantle the entire operation that had corrupted the institution my son trusted. I arrived at the school's conference room with a calm resolve masking the turbulent storm inside me. The room was filled with stern faces: administrators, board members, and investigators, ready to listen to my account. I laid out the timeline of Livia's absences, Kashin's dubious payments for special tutoring sessions, and the hotel receipts that confirmed clandestine meetings. I projected the surveillance footage, watching as the grainy images revealed the unmistakable moments: Livia's furtive hand on Kashin's arm, the whispered exchanges by the faculty entrance, and the unmistakable timestamp that linked everything together. Every piece of evidence was displayed with clinical precision, leaving no room for doubt that I in that moment. I saw the veneer of respectability crack. The school board members exchanged uneasy glances, and even the law enforcement officials recognized the significance of the unfolding scandal. I continued, this network of deceit wasn't just about a personal betrayal, it was a systematic exploitation of trust. My wife's actions, coupled with Cashin's complicity, have not only endangered our family, but have also undermined the integrity of an institution meant to nurture our children. My voice was steady, measured. Every word was carefully chosen to reveal the full scope of the conspiracy as I spoke. The door opened and in walked Livia, summoned by an urgent call from the board. Her eyes widened as she saw the assembled evidence, the stern faces around her, and the undeniable proof of her double life. For a long, heavy moment, she said nothing. Then, as if attempting to muster an explanation, she began to stammer out half-truths. But the evidence was irrefutable. Cashin had already been suspended pending investigation, and the financial records painted a clear picture of illicit transactions. It wasn't just about an affair, it was about exploiting her position and trust for personal gain. The board's chairman, a man whose reputation for integrity was well known, declared, effective immediately, an independent investigation will be launched. All parties implicated in this network will be held accountable. The atmosphere shifted palpably, the weight of impending justice palpable in the silence that followed. I could see relief in the eyes of those who had once quietly doubted the school's operations, and I knew that I had done more than avenge my personal betrayal. I had protected the future of countless children, including my own son, Ushvin. After the meeting, Livia was led away by officers. I did not feel vindictive satisfaction at her arrest. Instead, I felt the bitter sting of betrayal coupled with a renewed determination to rebuild. The painful truth was laid bare, and with it came the promise of accountability. I had risked everything, the stability of my family, my sense of identity, to bring light to a network of corruption that had thrived in shadows. My quiet determination had forced the hand of an institution that had long concealed its secrets. In the weeks that followed, the investigations unfolded publicly, leading to firings, resignations, and legal actions against those complicit in the scheme. Cashin was eventually charged with multiple counts of fraud and misconduct, while the covert financial channels were frozen and traced back to criminal masterminds. The fallout was swift and far-reaching, and I received messages of thanks from parents and community members who had felt betrayed by a system they had trusted. Standing in the ruins of what had once been our secure life, I began the arduous task of reconstruction. The journey ahead would not erase the personal pain of betrayal, but it had forged in me an unyielding resolve, a resolve to seek truth and justice even when the path was dark. In the end, my revenge was not a reckless act of violence or bitterness. It was the quiet, methodical dismantling of a corrupt system that had betrayed me and so many others. As I walked out of the courthouse on a chilly afternoon, the air felt different, crisp with the promise of a fresh start. I no longer carried the weight of betrayal alone. I carried with me the knowledge that truth, when pursued relentlessly, can shatter even the most carefully constructed illusions. And while my heart would forever bear the scars of deception, I had reclaimed my power by ensuring that those who once preyed on trust were finally exposed to the light. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.